Windows. It's done scrappy. It has 154 6-inch blocks. All of them with a set-in seam.
I got that color.
I had no clue what I was doing with this. I actually drew the cutting line and drew the sewing line on every one of these babies. But I love the thing. I really, really do. This is a good example of why you don't go buy cheap fabric also. There's a lot of stuff in here that just, like I said, I was using what I could get my hands on. Eyes out and sewing on this and getting the last few blocks, and Jack says, "Are you going to take that out? It looks really bad." I said, "No, I can always find my Desert Storm block anywhere. Just run my hands over the quilt." So, but that was a fun quilt to make. This quilt I purchased. This is 1940s, 50s fabrics, and you can see how well preserved it is as far as the colors are concerned. It's an orange peel. This is all applique. This is hand pieced. She had to take some extra stitches in some of the block corners because it started pulling apart. The reason I bought this one, this piece of fabric right here with the little kitty cats on it, when I was in the 6th grade, we were living in Georgia, and our class was going to Pine Mountain, Georgia and Atlanta for our class trip. And my mother made a skirt for me and my 2 best friends out of fabric looked just like that. And so it struck a note with me, and I said, I got to have the quilt. Bright orange. And she stitched it by hand. It certainly does not take away from the quilt in any way. It was just a different technique.
Kind of looks kind of neat.
Yeah, she did an excellent job. I love this quilt. It's been used. I mean, it's been washed. You can see that in the condition of the blocks. The hand quilting on it is really nicely done. It's got a few marks, spots. Of course, by the time we get older, we've got a few marks and spots. Do a lot, but I'm not going to go quite that deep. This one was made by my grandmother.
And she done the same thing with this.
A little bit different. She loved cross stitch, and this was done back. She started this in the late 50s and gave it to me for my high school graduation in '64. She made hundreds of tablecloths, quilts, that sort of thing. They were all kits that she'd buy and do them. She could not hand quilt because she'd broken her wrist as a young woman, and her wrist didn't have the flexibility. So there was a woman in Jonesboro, Arkansas, who quilted for her. Charged her $50 a piece to hand quilt her quilts. It was a long time ago, though.
Yeah.
$50 was a lot of money. And the only requirement of the quilter was that you provide her with a sheet with the seams taken out. Think about how tightly woven a sheet is. It's like quilting through a rock. But I asked her one time, years and years later, I said, "How did you do that all day, every day?" She said, "I quilted all day, every day for 20 minutes. She said, "I'd put it on the frame, set a timer, sit and quilt for 20 minutes, get up, move around, stretch my arms, my back, everything else, eat something, go back and quilt for 20 more minutes." Now, you can also see in these, and this one's not quite as bad as a couple of the others I've got, she didn't put enough quilting in it for the type of batting at that time. And of course, we used our quilts. We slept under them, we carried them around in the yard as kids. But this one, she has taken a sheet and folded it to the front. Well, that's the difference you're seeing there. And she has just done a running stitch. It's not even as nicely done as her quilting stitch around there. I had this one on my bed one time, and I sat down on the side of the bed, and I put my hand down, and I was like, "Ow!" And there was a pin inside the quilt sticking. Remember the old pins that had the little flat head on them? Well, I tried every way I could to get it over to a seam allowance, somehow get it out, couldn't do it. So I finally pulled it up, cut it off with 10 snips. So there's a top in there somewhere floating around. Got these upside down to you. Let me turn this one around. This one was made by my mother. My grandmother and a group of ladies met every Wednesday at her house to sew. They weren't necessarily quilting, they were just sewing. Some crocheted, some knitted. My grandmother supported herself making Raggedy Ann dolls for years. And Mother joined that group the year that we were living back there when I was in 4th grade. So she started this there. The only store in town that sold fabric was JCPenney's. And the only thing they sold was solids. So this is where she got it. This pattern was a free pattern inside a Fairfield batting package. I think they still sell this pattern. And Mother told me that it was a real bear to put these shapes together because it's not straight rows like we're used to. You'll notice too, again, we used them. Look at the binding on this baby. And this was quilted by this same lady. And this one is, when you hold it up to a window or something, you can really see lumps of batting. They're the only quilting in a block. These are quilted around the outside, and then there's a flower here. So the batting is kind of lumpy down through here. Doesn't change the fact that I wouldn't take anything in the world for the quilt. It's just, that's the way they did it. The old cotton battings, they really should have had quilting no more than about 3/4 of an inch to an inch apart. And we have some here that are done that way. Different people. It's really a 9-patch on point. If you've seen the General's Wives quilts that I made, the extra quilts in that, Hood's Children, it's the purple one, it is using this pattern. I just love the way it looks when it's hanging up. It's just different. The quilting on this is really, really well done. She's got a really small cross hatch here and in the 9-patch blocks, and there's a spider web type image in here. Now this quilter quilted with white thread, and you can look at it closely. Her knots are often on top of the quilt. She did not bury her knots like we're more inclined to do today. And it's just kind of a fun quilt to have hanging on the rack. I was very fortunate. My mother called me one time and she said, "I've lost that pink quilt your grandmother made." I said, "Oh." Well, we were living at Fort Bragg at the time, and one day she said, "Do you want this little love seat hide-a-bed? I know you need something smaller in your den." I said, "Yeah, I'll drive up." So I went up to Virginia and got it, put it in the back of my station wagon, came home, put it in the den. And you know how those old hide-a-beds, you couldn't get them always to go down? Well, I was getting mad. I wouldn't go down. I ripped that thing open, and in the process, the mattress came off. This was folded between the box springs and the mattress. And it was so stuck down in those springs. My daughters and I really struggled to get that out of there. And in the process, it's got a lot of holes in it. Now, if you're repairing an old quilt, you can do that if it's print, and usually it's kind of invisible. You can find a reproduction, or you can go to the antique stores or the thrift stores and you can find old fabrics. With a solid fabric, it's almost impossible to hide a repair. It just simply is going to not be the same color. The fading is going to be that way. So I worried with this for a long time about what am I going to do to fix it. I finally ended up, if you can't really see it, these are covered with bridal veil tulle, the real fine tulle. Just cut it to shape and stitch it around the edges of the blocks that you want to hide. It doesn't change the fact that there are holes in it. It just keeps the batting from falling apart and helps keep it from deteriorating anymore. This one obviously needs to have a little bit more bridal veil on it. It's deteriorating rapidly. And this one, if you feel the edges, it has really big lumps of batting in it. But there again, it just didn't have enough. Again, I purchased. Love
Trip around the world.
the colors in this. And whoever
I
this,
made a trip around the world.
they're fun to make. They really,
Mine is all political fabric.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Stars.
So sorry. Now this one, you'll notice she followed her colors all the way out to this blue.
Oh, I love it.
But then, well, it goes a little bit further to the pink. But then she wanted to make it rectangular, so it's got some extra pieces on each end to get it there. Hand quilted. One of the beautiful things on this quilt is the way she finished it. Now this had to have been done after it was quilted. If you look on the ends, and you can turn the end up there, she would have sewn a piece of fabric along this edge, face down, and then turned it to the back, stitched it over her backing,
That was
and then
a
quilted
neat
it.
idea.
and all the way around it's the same orange until you get to this edge.
Oh, cute.
And she run out of material.
Yeah, she ran out, so she used the dark orange and then this little print. And if you look at the corners, and by all means touch it, it's not going to hurt it. Some of them have patched where it's come together. There's a couple of them that she actually cut it square to go around it. There's no seam in it. So it's really fun to see what people do to quilts and what they did to them.
That is so neat the way she
Isn't
did
that cool?
Now you purchased this one?
Mm-hmm.
And I like the end of that, the
Yeah.
way I think
Just
that
use-
is
Isn't that character?
the fabric when
Yeah,
she run out. I
that's
think
the only place that there's any
I think
print
that's
on that quilt.
neat.
It's about that far.
So when I run out of fabric, I'm gonna do that.
There you go.